He came back home with dinner, only to find out that his wife called him weak in front of his daughter. You wouldn't believe what he did next.
My name is Warren Mitchell, and I used to believe I was living the American dream. Two-story colonial house in suburban Ohio, a daughter I would die for, and a wife I thought hung the moon. 14 years of marriage. 14 years of believing that the life I had built with my own two hands was something sacred, something worth protecting. I worked double shifts as a civil engineer, skipped fishing trips with the guys, missed college reunions, also my family could have the best version of me that existed. Turns out, the best version of me still wasn't good enough for the woman sleeping in my bed. It was a Thursday evening in late October. I remember because the leaves had turned that deep amber color my daughter always loved, and she used to press them between the pages of her school books every fall. I had left work early that day. My project had wrapped ahead of schedule, and for once I wanted to surprise my family with dinner from their favorite Italian place downtown. I was feeling good, hopeful even, like maybe we could sit around the table together for once without my wife, Diane, checking her phone every 3 minutes with that distant look in her eyes that I had been foolishly chalking up to stress. I pulled into the driveway quietly. Diane's car was there, and so was my daughter Lily's bicycle. I grabbed the takeout bags, pushed through the front door, and was about to announce myself when I heard voices drifting from the living room. Something in the tone stopped my feet cold on the hardwood floor. It wasn't an argument, it was worse than that. It was a conversation being shared between two people who trusted each other completely, and I was not one of them. I stood in the hallway, hidden by the wall, and I listened. Diane was talking to Lily, my 14-year-old daughter, and she was describing a man, not me. She was describing him in ways that no mother should ever describe any man to her child, let alone a man who was not the girl's father. She called him unstoppable. She laughed in that breathless, girlish way I hadn't heard from her in years, and she told Lily that this man was everything, powerful, commanding, the kind of man who made you feel like the world outside the bedroom didn't exist. And then she said it. The sentence that cracked something permanently inside my chest. He's nothing like your weak father, baby. Nothing at all. I pressed my back against the wall. The takeout bags were still in my hands. The garlic bread was still warm. Lily didn't gasp. Lily didn't defend me. My daughter, the girl I had coached through every nightmare, sat beside through every fever, driven to every dance recital at 6 a.m, laughed. She actually laughed and said, "Yeah, I figured Daddy was kind of boring." Diane told her everything then, as casually as if she were reading a grocery list. She was leaving me. She was keeping the house. Our house, the one I had spent 3 years saving for before we even put down a deposit. She said Lily could come live with them, that it would be a fresh start, a better life with a real man leading the household. And Lily, my sweet Lily, said she was happy about it. Said she had always felt like something was missing. I don't know how long I stood there. Time does a strange thing when your world collapses. It either speeds up or stretches into something unrecognizable. What I do know is that at some point, I must have shifted my weight, because the old floorboard near the hallway entrance let out that familiar creak it had been making for 2 years, the one I kept meaning to fix. The laughter stopped. I stepped into the living room doorway. Diane's face went the color of fresh concrete. Lily's mouth dropped open. They were frozen, both of them, sitting on the couch I had picked out, underneath the ceiling fan I had installed myself, in the home I had bled for. And I stood there holding Italian takeout like a man who had just walked into the wrong life. Nobody spoke for what felt like a full minute. Then I set the bags down on the coffee table, slowly, deliberately. I looked at my wife, had really looked at her, and something shifted inside me that I cannot fully explain. The grief was there, yes. The humiliation was scorching. But underneath all of it, rising quietly like floodwater, was something cold and clear and absolute. I was done. Not just done with the marriage, done being the man who absorbed everything quietly and kept showing up anyway, done being the ghost in my own house, done being the cautionary tale Diane used to make herself feel better about her choices. I turned around, walked to the kitchen, found the largest trash bags we owned, and I went upstairs to our bedroom. What happened next would change all of our lives permanently. I want to be clear about something. I am not a violent man. I have never raised my hand at anyone in my life, and I was not about to start. But there is a particular kind of rage that lives beneath grief, quiet, surgical, and absolutely without mercy. And that was the version of me that walked into that bedroom and began dismantling 14 years of Diane's carefully curated life, one drawer at a time. I pulled her clothes from the closet first. The designer dresses she had convinced me we needed credit cards for. The shoes lined up like a museum exhibit along the back wall. The silk blouses she wore to her office job while I was out in the field at 6 in the morning. I stuffed everything into bags with the focused efficiency of a man who had made an irreversible decision and was no longer interested in second-guessing it. Diane appeared in the doorway within minutes, her composure partially recovered, arms crossed like she still had authority in that room. "Warren, what do you think you're doing?" I didn't answer her. I kept packing. "Warren," her voice sharpened, "this is my house too. You cannot just—" "You want the house?" I said, still not looking at her. "Then you can have it empty." She started talking fast after that, explaining, reframing, doing that thing she had always been gifted at, where she rearranged the facts of a situation until somehow I was the problem. She told me I was overreacting. She told me the conversation I had overheard was taken out of context. She actually used the words "out of context" to describe telling our daughter that her father was weak and that she was replacing him with another man. I zipped the first bag shut and reached for another. When I got to her vanity, I swept every bottle, every perfume, every piece of jewelry into a bag without ceremony. Then I carried everything downstairs and out to the front lawn. Bag by bag, trip by trip, I moved her world outside. The October air was sharp, and the neighbors' lights were starting to flick on. But I was beyond caring about appearances. Appearances were what had kept me silent for years while my marriage rotted from the inside. Diane followed me out to the lawn, hissing at me to stop, to be reasonable, to think about what the neighbors would think. And somewhere behind her, standing at the front door with her arms wrapped around herself, was Lily, watching her father with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It wasn't amusement anymore. It was something closer to uncertainty. I stopped and looked at my daughter directly. "You said I was boring," I said. Not with anger, just with the plain weight of it. She opened her mouth and closed it again. "I coached your soccer team for 4 years," I said. "I drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to pick you up from that school trip when the buses broke down. I worked overtime every holiday season for the last 6 years, so that you never once had to hear the word no when it mattered." I paused. "But boring is fine. Boring I can live with." I turned back to the lawn and kept working. What Diane had not yet realized, what she would not fully understand until my attorney contacted her the following Monday, was that I had spent the previous 6 months quietly preparing for exactly this possibility. Not because I had known for certain, but because the writing had been assembling itself on the wall for long enough that a man with any sense would have started reading it. I had consulted a lawyer. I had documented everything. I had moved a significant portion of our joint savings into a protected account, perfectly within my legal rights, given the evidence of financial misconduct I had uncovered when Diane had started billing her weekend trips to our shared account. The house, it turned out, was not as simple for her to keep as she had announced to our daughter. My name was on the deed. My income had secured the mortgage, and my lawyer was considerably better than the one she scrambled to find in the weeks that followed. I did not burn her things, though the impulse visited me briefly. Instead, I donated most of it. Truckloads of it went to a women's shelter 2 towns over. I kept nothing that carried her energy in it. I repainted every room within the first month. I had the floors refinished. I replaced the furniture piece by piece until the house felt like mine again, because it was. Diane moved in with her boyfriend. That arrangement lasted less than 4 months. I heard through mutual friends that the man who was supposedly unstoppable turned out to be considerably less impressive when he was responsible for half a mortgage and a woman with expensive taste and no income of her own. Lily came to me quietly, about 2 months after everything collapsed. She sat at my newly refinished kitchen table and she cried, and she told me she was sorry, and I held my daughter the way I always had, completely, without condition. Because that is what a father does. Weak men do not rebuild. Weak men do not stand in cold October air, stripped of every illusion, and choose dignity over destruction. Weak men do not raise daughters, work impossible hours, and love difficult people for 14 years without flinching. I know exactly what kind of man I am. And now, finally, so does everyone else.
Sometimes, the weak man is the strongest man in the room. Justice finally had his way. Comment if you like karma.